Hello everyone, welcome to Week of Web, where we dive into full stack web development. And here we are almost done with the event. Today is the last event or day 7 of a week, where we will learn about hosting on Heroku. So as we remember, yesterday we developed a server using Express and we created our database as well. We connected our database to our server, but then all these changes were only there in the back side of the code. We were able to view our files stored in our database and they were only visible to our backend yesterday. So now what we can do is today we are going to first uh, make sure that those changes appear on the front end side of our code, and then we will host our website on Heroku. So now let us get started. First of all, today no theory. So have already covered all the theory we needed, and now we are just going to code. So what are you waiting for? Let's jump into a development environment. So now yesterday, what we did was we created our Express app completely. We created the server and then we hosted it locally on our computer itself, on our local computer. So today, what we are going to do is we are going to host it. So before we have to host anything, we have to make sure that it is getting the available port for that hosting server. So what we would do is we will first add a constant variable, that is port, which will store the port number which is available for now and where our application is being running. So that could be detected by using process dot environment dot port. So what it does is in Node.js, we have a global variable called process. And inside that process, we have an environment method where all the configurations of our server is being stored. Inside that configurations, we have something called port stored there where it will store in which port our application is running. So if at all any port is running before itself, it will take that itself, or else if this port is not defined itself, so what will happen is this boolean will give a false value, or undefined is always equal to false in JavaScript. What we will do now is we will if it gives false, that means our port is not defined, so we'll define a port here. Then so we'll add an or condition here, and here we'll add port 5000. So let us have it at port 5000 today, and then we'll change the port over here. So we are not defining it statically now. We have our port from our Node.js server itself, and here also we'll change our string template. So now I'll remove all of this and I'll add this variable to display. So now that is done. So our port configuration is done properly. So now let us get done with all our APIs now. Yesterday we created our index API, our API to get our HTML page or our HTML written inside EJS itself. And then we created an API where it will store data to a database. So if I open our Firebase now, and here I'll open console.firebase, and inside that I'll select our project. Inside console, I'll select our project, the project we are working on currently. And then yesterday we created some data in our database using our APIs. And this were it. So remember, Ashwin, you told that you'll be playing GTA 5. So did you do it yesterday? So all right. Yes, that's nice. You are enjoying yourself. Fine. So let us move ahead now. So what we want to do is we need to get all these tasks in our index file itself when it renders. So what we will do is we'll define all this inside our this API itself, where while rendering our index.html or index.ejs, we will do all these calculations over there itself. So here it will get all the data from our database, and then we are not sending JSON this time. Will store it as a an object. We'll store it as an object over here. So we can just pass objects over here like this. So here I'll type task list is equal to task list. So I'm creating an object. Inside that object, I'm creating a variable called task list, and I'm assigning a task list to it directly. And with this, we will be done with our get part. But then it will access our all our files here. I'll delete these tasks over here. Uh, yeah, this part now we don't need this part. But then the problem here is we don't have the ID of our documents. We will need a ID for a document so that we will be able to select it while we are, if let's say we want to work on some data. So I'll start this server for now. So yes, yesterday I told you about NodeMon, right? So I'll use NodeMon index.js, and it has started the server at 5,000. So since this port was not defined earlier, so it has taken the 5,000 now. And now let us open our local host. And yes, so here what we did earlier was we created a separate API to display all the elements in JSON format. But today what we have to do is we have to get it inside our front end directly. So in front end we have each task defined over here. So we'll have to run a for loop in our EJS file such that all the task list tasks are taken. And in that task we need some uniqueness in our all the elements. So to make uniqueness, just say I write read article twice, then that is a problem, right? It won't be unique anymore. So we can't use this read an article as the text itself for keeping it unique. What we'll have to do is we'll have to grab the ID. And like I said yesterday, that Firebase creates its own ID automatically. Remember we clicked on auto ID method so that it is generating all the ID for us automatically. Yes, so we will be using this ID itself directly. So to do that, array will need an array, but inside an array, we can't just pass a single variable every time. That string variable we can't pass. We'll have to pass an object. So let us do that now. So instead of rendering it here, I'll render it inside the dot then method so that it's inside our scope and the scope is not lost. Let's say if it was over here, then what will happen is it will be out of the scope of the task list. So this data will be inside this scope, but then when it comes out, it won't be able to store the task list outside its scope because this scope has been lost now. So what we will do is we'll keep it inside the scope directly. And then what we will do is we will inside snapshot itself, we'll create an object. So let us comment this out. And then let us create an object now. So let us call this object a task, and this task will have two variables. One is the ID. So how do we access the ID of our document? So for that we have a method called doc.id over here. So our ID is defined now. Then how do we get the data of our all the data of our document? So previously we were grabbing that itself. We are grabbing the data itself. So now we'll do that. We'll get the uh, let's call it text because it's a text. It's a string, so we'll have it call it as text, and inside that we'll call it as doc.data. And data, we cannot just directly put dot here because here data is our function. All our data is encrypted. Like I told you in yesterday's session, the database helps us encrypt our data so that the client cannot see it. So if our password is not revealed, that is a good thing, right? We don't want people to see our password. So that's why Firebase does it for us. It will encrypt the data automatically, and to decrypt the data, we'll have to use the function. So data is a function over here. After the function is executed, it will return as an object of all our data. So inside that, we'll have to get our task text, because in our Firebase, if we see, we have defined the variable as task over here. So we'll grab this task now. And with that, our object is ready. But then let us push this object inside our array instead of pushing the variable. So for that, I'll uncomment this and I'll just push task inside over here. So task. So I don't know whether it works or not yet. So what I'll do is I'll log it in our node server itself directly and see whether it works. So I'll just put console.log and I'll put here let us put task list here, and this task list will be, when it is completed, then it should display the whole task list. Now if I reload this, the server, it should return me all the IDs of our elements. So we have play GTA 5, and then in that we have some unique ID defined. So the first three letters are BDA. Let us check, does it match? Yes, it matches it. BDA we have. So like that, we have uniqueness defined in our database. And like this, our document collection method of NoSQL is helping us identify each and every document of our database. So now that is done. So yes, now what we have to do is we have to get this data loaded in our front end. So we have this variable created, which is going to our front end now. So when we put render here, it will render the index.egs file, and then it will also keep this object created inside our rendering directly. So with that, we'll go to index.egs now. Over here, so in index.ejs, we have EJS defined over here. So what does EJS stand for? I guess I made a mistake yesterday. It is not called extended JavaScript. It is called embedded JavaScript. So here in HTML, we are embedding JavaScript over here. So with this, what we will do is, instead of having so many li tags, we can just loop over it, right? So since we don't have a scripting language now, we have a programming language now. We have the power of JavaScript now. So we can use these functionalities like if else, our loops are there, our functions are there. All these things can be used here now. So now we will use a loop over here. So let us create a for loop. So I'll just go here, and the VS Code automatically generates the syntax for me. So here I can search for loop, and I'll just press enter. But instead of for loop, since we already have task list, which is an array, so we can use for each method as well here. So again, I'll just press this. And what does this mean is that whenever we open a tag with percentage inside it, we can write JavaScript inside that tag over there. And this could be done only for one single line. We cannot do it for multiple lines as of now. So this is the syntax of our EJS. So do we have for each method here? Yes, we have for each method here. What is our array? Our array is task list. And inside this task list, we'll have many tasks, right? So let us name it task for readability, or we can put any variable name over here. That is up to us. What it basically does is, it will create a variable task called for each element of it, so that we can, instead of putting array of ith element, we are just putting task, where basically ith element is the task itself. So this task could be of any name. So keeping that in mind, let us move ahead. So inside for each method, what do we need? We need an li tag, right? So we'll copy this up, and then this, what it will do is, it will for each task. So it is iterating our tasks, right? So how many ever tasks are there, that many times it will keep iterating over it. And then what we could do it, instead of this content to be read an article, we need some other content to be there, right? What do we need the content to be? So moving on to our index.js file, we have our task list defined. Inside task list, we have this task object created. So if I console log also, you see this is an array of objects. So inside an array, we have selected an array. Then it is selecting each element. So our task variable is selecting this element. Then in the next iteration, it will select this element. So this is still an object, right? So we can use the dot operator here to select each item inside it, right? So let us use the dot operator here. So we can first select the task. So here I'll put task, and then task dot we have to use, we have to display the text over there, right? So that is possible by doing this, but what it will do is it will not uh, compile this code because we haven't declared the EJS syntax over here. So every time we need, if we need to display something on the HTML side, if that is a variable and we have to display it after compiling it, we use the notations of EJS like this. We put the we open the angular bracket, and then we type percentage and then equal to, and then with this we similarly close it as well. So we'll put percentage and close the angular bracket. And now after reading this syntax, EJS will start reading this variable. And then similarly we have for task delete as well. But what we want task delete to do is when we click on our website, when we go to our website and click on this element, what it should do is it should delete this at all from the front end, as well as it should delete it from our database as well. So we are losing our front end every time we reload our page, and we are redirecting to our page after every time we add a task. So managing the front end is not a problem over here because we are it is reloading the page every time, so that's not a problem. But then on clicking, it should create a post request in itself, and HTML can only do post request by using a form. So what we will have to do is we'll have to create a form for each and every element, and that element should store the ID of whatever text we have selected for that time. So let us do that now. So here I will just add a form over here, and VS Code will give me two methods, get and post. I'll select post method here, and action. What was the action in JS file? We haven't created the delete API yet. So before doing that, I'll show you how it looks if we are to compile it like this. So when I save and I reload, yes, all our data from our database has been loaded now. So if we are to add any, let's say a task over here, what do you want me to add this time, Ashwin? What do you want to do today? Go for a ride. All right. So you will go for a ride today. Weekend mood, right? Go for a ride. And when I click on enter, it will reload the page and it will add the item for us. So that works like a charm, right? We are just running a for loop for all our elements. Easy peasy. So now with that, we are done with our and creating an task and then updating the list. So our front end is now updating all the list over here, correct? But then this button is still not working where it should delete the task. So to do that, we'll, like I told, it cannot be clicked, and if we create an anchor tag also, anchor tag cannot perform post request. Always keep that in mind. Anchor tag can only redirect you to some other page, but it cannot create a post request. It can only do maybe a get request as well. So to fix that, what we will do is we'll create a form, and then that form should make use of the delete API. So this delete API, let us create it now. So how to delete an API, how to delete an element from our Firestore database. So to do that, what we will do is we will first create a post request, and inside that post request, so app.post, and inside the post request, what are the two parameters that we take? What are the two arguments that a post request takes? First one is the name of the API, and the second one is the request response method, right? So let us create the delete API over here, and in the delete API we will create a request response method. And let us forget about this try and catch, we'll use that some other time, but for now let us just focus on how to delete something from our database. So first of all, we'll have to select the ID of our data of our the task element. So this ID we have to grab for each element. So how do we do that? We have doc.id, right? But this we are taking from the front end because we are clicking it, right? So instead of writing it directly, what we can do is we can take it from the front end. So we'll create a variable for that so that it could store, it could take it from the request. It could take it from the request and store it in itself like we did here. So I'll store this as delete ID. So where were we? We were at, yes, we are storing the delete ID over there. So we'll take the request. Inside request, we'll select the body. So the body will contain all our variables, right? Like we discussed yesterday over here. After the question mark, we have all the variables created, right? So in that, one of the variable will be the delete ID, which we have right now, which we have to select over here. So to select that, what we will do is we will just type the name of the ID we need. So let us assume an ID to be delete ID for now in small letter ID. All right. And then what we'll do is we'll create a method. We'll create a database method. We'll select the collection. So what is our collection name? Our collection name is to do, right? So let us select the to do collection. And inside to do collection, we have to select a document. So we have so many documents, right? We have all these documents. We have to select a document. So we'll use the doc method, and inside doc we'll pass the delete ID so that it will select that ID, right? And inside that I'll just put the delete command. So what this will do is it will go to the to do collection. Inside to do collection, it will select that document, and that document will be deleted using this function. Pretty easy, right? And for our reference, let us just log it. And we'll just write, let us just pass an ID. Let us see which ID is being deleted. So I'll just put the variable delete ID here, and I'll just write is deleted. And with this, we will be done with the API which we need to create. But the problem here is I'm taking the request, but I'm not using the response. I'm not giving back any response, right? So that's why this variable is in slightly less bright color. So let us use this variable also. So res dot, I'll just redirect the user back to our to-do list. I'll redirect it to our home page. And with this, we are done with the API part. We have created it in the backend, right? Now let us implement this in our front end as well. So let us go to index.ejs, and inside index.ejs we have to create a form now which will create a post request. So that part is done over here, and inside this form we will just put this span over here directly, and this span can will have instead of cross simply as a text, we'll create it as an input. So to do that, what we'll do is we'll just put input over here, input, and type equal to submit, right? So this cross button will act as your submit button, like this add button was acting, add button was acting as our input to this text form. So here, instead of this add button, we are creating a cross button, right? So let us do that, and then we'll just give it some class this time so that we can change its styling later. So I'll put delete submit. Now this part is done. So let us see how our website looks now. So if I reload, yes, this doesn't look good at all. We are getting the submit button along with the cross. So to do that, to fix that, what we can do is we'll create an hidden input. So we have another input called hidden, which let us create it outside the span now. So let us put input, and here we have something called hidden, and this hidden will have the will store the values of our variable which we are going to pass through the post request to our backend. So it will have the name delete id, and it will have the value. What value will it have? It will have the value of our id, which is uh, here, this id. So we have to select this id now. So to select this id, we are having EJS over here, so let us write it in EJS format now. So I'll put percentage, and then equal to, we have the task as our index, so we'll put task dot, we are having id over here, so I'll put task dot id, and then with that it should create an element which will store our id, and that element will be hidden, correct? And this, instead of submit button, I need it to be a instead of submit button, I need it to be the cross button itself integrated inside it. So first of all, I'll have to close this EJS tag. That's why all these colors are appearing to be different now. So VS Code gives us highlighting of syntax, which is helpful in such situations where I forgot to add an EJS tag, EJS ending tag. So now this, instead of cross being here, what I'll do is I'll cut it and I'll put it here as a value of our submit button. And now if I check our website, how does it look? It looks like a cross button, but the problem here is this space is going waste. So let us debug that now. So I'll open the console. Inside this console, I'll check what are the spacings of each. So we have to go to our unordered list, and then in an unordered list, we are seeing how the spacing is going on. So you see the problem here is this uh, span which we have created, this form which we have created. So form is an block item, so it will take the whole width of the parent, and we needed a span element which was a small, it doesn't take the whole width, it takes the only space it needs. So what we'll do is we'll select this form, and we will create it as an inline block element which will help us to define its width and all. So let us do that now. So here we have our form. Now since we have two forms over here, so we'll have to define some id to our next form, but this form is also inside a for loop, so we'll need to create a class over here. So we'll create class, and let's call this class, what should we call this class? Or let us not just use the class itself, we can just give it an inline style itself, right? I haven't showed you inline style yet now, right? Yeah, I have showed you class ID and I haven't showed you inline style. So what I'll do is I'll just put the style attribute here, and I'll put display, and inside display I'll just type inline block, and when I save, let us see our website. It is still not fixed. So let us see why. Let us check our CSS now. So here, this is the task text, and this is the delete item, and the delete item is having inline block property. Okay, and then yes, I have selected this form here, so that is selecting that form as well. So instead of selecting this form, what I have to do is I have to apply this property only to our input text form. So we'll have to create IDs for that now. So going to our index.ejs, our first form here, this is our first form. So this first form can have some ID called input text. Are we already using it? Yes, we are already using it. So I'll type it as input form. Task input, I'll put task input form. Okay, and then this ID, I'll just replace it with the form over here. And then to select a form, to select an ID, we use the hash operator. And now let us check whether it fixed our problem. Yes, it fixed our problem. Now this is what we needed. So now this box also, it was looking way better earlier, right? So let us fix that also now. Here in our index.ejs, we have, yes, now it is proper. I didn't save the file. So only that CSS file was loaded, and inside that CSS file, we didn't have that form selected as well, that form unselected. So now I saved the file and now it is coming to be a lot better than earlier. So here, what we were doing, we were changing the styles of this button, right? So this button is still a span element, right? Task.delete, but this task.delete is inside an input. So let us do one thing. Let us use this class delete submit and then change its value. So in the last, I'll select the class delete submit, and in delete submit, remember we did similar styling to our add button as well. So if we see our add button over here, what is the add buttons selector? Now let us see that. Our add button is having the ID submit. So let us see where our submit is there. So this is the submit. So let us copy this property itself because we did similar things to it, right? And then we need to remove all the height and width properties. And this should fix our problem. Let us see now. Yes, everything is fixed. Now this is how originally our form used to look, and we still don't know whether this is a button because every time the cursor should change, right? So we'll add the cursor as well over here. I'll change the cursor to be pointer, and now when I reload and check, yes, now the cursor is changing, and now we can note that this is actually a button. So this part is done now, and this should call our API as also. So let us check whether we have put our API callback properly. So we have form action delete and we have post also. So it should, and we have implemented our API also properly over here. So let us check that out now, shall we? So let us say I don't want to go for a run. Yes, that is removed, and it should log also what was deleted. Yes, and it logs also. It logs what was deleted, and then it will log, since we are redirecting to slash, this API will be called again, right? We are redirecting to home page, so this API will be called again, and inside here also we are logging the task list. So that's why for every API we are getting some output in our console, and that is how we test everything, whether everything works fine or not. So this was deleted and our new is this. So now let us see our application in full action. So give me a list of objects. So I'll delete everything and see how it looks like. So yes, our style is also working properly. Let us check whether our website is responsive. So what I will do is, inside our Chrome developer tools, we have something called toggle device emulation. So for an Galaxy folder website, it looks something like this, and this is how it looks. So yes, and for iPhone 6, this is how it looks, and as the list increases, automatically the height will increase as well. So that is how our website will look on a mobile device. So we can work on that as well. And this part where we make sure our website is working properly on all kinds of devices is called making a responsive design. So it is responding to our screen size, and that is our responsive design. All right. So this part is also done now. So now let us add some tasks to our database. So we deleted all the things, right? So our Firestore is also showing that all the data is deleted from here, right? So that part is done now. Suggest me a few activities now which you would like to do today. All right, in the chat box. Complete project. Okay, what project are you working on? Complete a project. then it creates the new list. All right, that's nice, Prashant. You're working on software development. So let us add that as well. Software development. And it will add that also to our list. Start T2 preparation. Yes, we are having T2 from next week, right? Yes, thank you for reminding me. Start T2 preparation. And yes, this is how our list works. So our create API is working. It is creating APIs and that APIs are being displayed on our page. So our get is working that way, our create API is working that way, and our delete API is also working. And that is how our whole application is built. So this was all about full stack development. Now there is another part to our backend development where we have to host our website so that everyone can view it. So simple way to do that is using Heroku. We can do this using Firebase as well. Firebase has the hosting functionality over here, but then it asks for, it needs us to initialize billing for it. So if we are enabling billing in it, we are giving a card, only then our Node.js application can work. But if we have to just host our static website, that is only the front end without the back end, then we can do that also without setting up our billing in our Firebase applications. But Heroku gives us the capability to host five applications simultaneously with the backend integrated in it. So let us create a new API over here or new project over here in Heroku. And then in new app, I'll just add week of web, and then I'll create the app. Now this is how it asks it. This Heroku is completely automated, so we literally don't have to do anything. We just have to put our Git repository and link our Git repository remote and create a remote link to it to our Heroku repository. And this way, what it will do is like GitHub, like how we have stored in GitHub, our origin is stored over there. So basically what origin means is on GitHub we have origin defined where our online repository is present. Similarly here for Heroku we have the Heroku remote created over here. So we have git remote Heroku, right? So our Heroku repository is created online on Heroku's platform. So now to host our website, what we have to basically do is just upload it to their repository and they will manage it from there. But before that, what we have to do is we have to set up a repository for that. So remember we added the service account key. This contains all our secret keys, API keys and everything. So the problem here is we don't want people to know it, and Heroku doesn't show their code to other people, but GitHub shows it. And so we'll have to add this to our GitHub, right? So to do that, what we'll have to do is so that this file is not uploaded online, we have something called .gitignore file. And inside the .gitignore file, all the files which aren't supposed to be uploaded online are present here. Like remember how I earlier told you that our node modules folder should not be uploaded online because it anyway we can install it easily using npm i command. So that should be over here. Yes, it is not uploading that. Similarly, we can add any file name we want, which shouldn't be uploaded online. So I'll just type here Firebase service account key. And inside that, I'll just tell the location of the file. So VS Code will provide relative path to us by just right clicking it and clicking on copy relative path. And then we can just paste it over there. And it will paste the path over there. So let us assume that if the file was inside views folder, that automatically that path will be completed. But since both the files, .gitignore file and service account key, both are in the root of our folder, so we can directly just write the file name and let us save that. So if you notice here, all these files we have changed. We have deleted HTML file and we created this many files. we created in EJS file. We and we made change. We created db.js file, and we made changes to all package.json file and package log.json file. So we need to first stage it. We can stage it by using git. It says disconnected. So I'll create a new terminal session here. Okay, for some reason this terminal is not working for me. So go to git bash and create a new one. All right, so I need to see what issue is happening over here. Now it is working. So I just have to the git bash had crashed earlier. So that is why it was showing disconnected. So I had to restart the git bash server for our integrated part. So what our VS Code does it creates the terminal outside VS Code, but shows all the things over here. So it creates some APIs over there also. We can call it like an API where it will access everything that is happening in the outside terminal inside the VS Code's integrated terminal. And that was being disconnected over here. So we'll just kill these two processes and we'll just add all our files to staging area. And then we'll create a history or a version. So to do that, we have what all did we do? We created a backend server. And then I'll enter my password. And after that, I just have to push it to our GitHub repository, not Heroku. So when I type git push here, by default, it means origin and main. So what it is doing is origin is linking to our repository, and inside that repository, we have a main branch. So if I show you all the remote locations, so I can just simply type git remote and I could type v. That shows us all the versions of our remote repositories which are connected to our git. So we, as of now, we have only origin, and for origin we have fetch method and push method. Fetch means pulling all the requests from our remote repository where it will download everything and collaborate all the changes to our local server. And then what push means is it will push it to our remote server. GitHub, it will push to our GitHub, and then everything will be collaborated over there as well. So it is a two-way thing, fetch and push thing, right? So this is origin. So if I have to push to origin, by default it will push to origin itself. But if I had some other added over here, so I can simply type git remote add to add new online repositories over here. So and then I have to type the branch name, and when I press on enter, okay, I made a typo in origin. Yes. So now it will start pushing the code, and all the code will be available on GitHub. So here our views is created. All the links to our DSC's events are over here. So all the 7 days events are present over here. And yes, all her files have been synced properly now. So with that done, let us get started with hosting process now. So in hosting, what change we have to do is, first of all, we have to remove this uh, exception that in git ignore, we have to pass this file also. So to pass this file, what I'll do is I'll just remove this part. And then there is something called cross origin. So what it does is when we are creating our website and the other contents from other websites are coming into our website. So what happens is there may be a possibility that we are getting attacked by malware. So to prevent that, we create rules and permissions so on what should be allowed and what shouldn't be allowed. So all these things are already written in an npm module. So if I just type npm I course, so course stands for cross origin management, and that will install it. And after that, I just have to go to our index.js file where all the backend code is written, and I have to import course over here. So I'll just type course equal to require course, and then this here I'll write course first, and then here we'll just write the basic headers for our HTTP request, which should be used by Express. So everything that is defined by course, we'll have to use it in our Express app as well, right? So I'll just use app.use, and inside that I'll create a function, request response function again, and then I'll tell it that after completing this process, you have to execute the following bottom code as well, right? Because what will happen is when I put request.response like I did earlier, when I did app.get over here, what happened was it ran this command, and after reaching this part where it rendered the index.js file, index.egs file, it just stopped over here, right? It didn't execute the create or delete. But when we have to mention that you have to execute the bottom next code, then we have to give another parameter in request response function called next. And then next can we'll just define the function over here where we will define the headers of our response. We'll just define the response, whether what should be the HTTP header, whether when our client takes that header, it will define that it should allow the cross origin as well. So I'll just type header. Remember, HTML head tag contains all the meta tags. So we have similar headers like that over here, which will define what is supposed to be done. So I'll just type here access control and origin. Inside there, the value of this property, I'll define it as allow everything, because we are just testing, right? We don't care if anyone attacks us as well. But when you're creating a professional app, make sure that you define the rules properly. Then again, we have res.header again. So we'll define another property of header, which is allow access all the headers. We'll just give it the access of all the headers also. So here I'll type access control, and this along with this I'll just have allow headers. So whatever header we have defined now, that should be allowed as well. Then it's what headers it should be all should be allowed. We will define it in a different array or different string. So here we'll allow origin, then we'll allow any type of content. So I'll type content type, and then I'll put any cross origin that is been requested. So X requested, I'll just put it over here, and I'll just put accept all of this. And then what I'll do is after executing this function, now I'll just type here next should be inside our app.use itself. So let us see where it is ending. It is ending over here. So I'll just here. Yes. Now this is correct. So our cross origin is also implemented over here now. With all these changes done, other changes which are possible that we can optimize our front end as well. So these images are very high quality. So in cases where we have small icons, where this high resolution image won't matter at all. So if we are presenting 200 by 200 pixel image with a 1080p image, so that image is like 5 times bigger than actually what we need. So this will be very unnecessary, and it will create a huge load on our website as well, because you're loading a big file here. So we can reduce the resolution also of the image and make sure that our website is running smoothly and loading as less data as possible. Okay, so this is one possibility. So after this, let us just host our website. So to do that, we will just go through the documentations of Heroku. Here it is telling that for existing repository, just create a remote access over here. So we just have to create a remote repository here. So we'll copy this into our terminal, and then it will tell us that we can update our Heroku app. So this part, git remote Heroku week of web. Okay, we just have to set the remote of Heroku to this. So we'll just run git remote add, and this will pass Heroku equal to this part. So I'll copy it and I'll paste it here. Already exists. Oh, so let us check that out also. Yes, Heroku fetch and push already exists. So let us run that command again now. So this is done. What we have to do is our remote access is created, our remote repository is created now. So now we have to push all our files with these changes to our Heroku repository. To do that, I'll first add it to the staging area, and then I will create a history or a commit or a version. There are so many names, right? With a message, deployment on Heroku. And then I will push it to Heroku. What do we have here? Do we have main or master? So we have to check that as well. So in our documentation, we have Heroku master over here. So git push Heroku master. So let us do that now. Heroku master. Reference to this Heroku app itself. Okay, let us check that out now. Let us try Heroku main as well, because everyone are changing from master to main. Remember, there was some revolution for Black Lives Matters. Remember that? So after that, GitHub changed their all notations from master slave. This master refers to master slave term, right? So to remove that, they changed from master to main everywhere. So let us see whether main also works here. So yes, that was one change we needed. So instead of master, we had to use the main branch. So it is being used everywhere now, even GitHub and Heroku both. And now that pushing is done over here, what it is doing is it is creating all our application over here. It is installing all the node modules, all the packages, everything it is doing. So yes, build is successful. This application may not specify any way to start a node process. All right, yes. So another feature of npm we have is, inside if we go over to our package.json file, we have something called scripts. npm can run any scripts we like. So here, for our Heroku to work, we should tell it that how to start the server. What are we using here? So I'll just type npm start, and this start will basically run the command node index.js. So that means whenever we are in this repository and it is starting some npm, it will run npm start command, and that npm start command should run this script, which is node index.js. So when we do node index.js, we have application over here, right? This application starts at localhost 5000. So similarly, that Heroku web server should also know how to start the server. So now we have to push this change also now. So we'll just do git add again, git commit added npm start, and then I'll push it again to Heroku main. It is building, it is caching all the node modules. The build is successful. Now it is compressing it, all the possible optimizations, it is performing it for us. And then with that, it has deployed our application to this website. Now let us see our website on the internet. And yes, our application is available over here. I'll disable my dark reader over here so that CSS loads properly. And then this is also connected to our Firestore database. using our those secret API keys we had in service account key, right? All those are available in our Heroku repository as well, so it could connect to our Firebase application. And then here also we can just type play GTA 5, and this should be available in our database as well. And now if you also can try it out, so not only me, this is not a local host, now this is available on the internet. So now if you enter this link in your computer, you should be able to access the list. So Ashwin, would you like to try to add anything to this list? Now add a list to it and I'll reload and check for it. How about that? So I'll send this list in the chat box, in this link in the chat box. All right, Ashwin is done. So let us see what Ashwin added. And he said free food. All right, so you're going for free food now. And then you also said hello. So see, all of you can access this website now. So isn't that? So in 7 days, we learned how to make the front end of an application, how to create the back end of an application, how to link the front end and back end, how to create a database. And within 7 days, we are ready with with a full application. If you followed along this whole project we did, you can also publish this application with your name on it. And of course, you have the MIT license, so you can use this repository anytime you like, and I won't mind. So with that, we are done with our application, fully and completely hosted online. So we completed all these concepts in these 7 days. Wasn't it interesting? Tell me in the comment box. All right, Priya, you liked it. Yes. Yes, definitely, Ashwin. You will have to practice it a lot, because all these things doesn't we cannot do it in just one day. So that's why for each and every concept I took one day each, and that's how we were able to do. And with this, you can call yourself a full stack developer now. And yes, Prashanti, we learned a lot in these 7 days. We had so many concepts discussed over here. So yes, but then we cannot end over here, right? This was a full webinar about how to learn a full stack development. But then there are other concepts which we were not able to conduct over here due to our time constraint. So other things are, we have CSS frameworks available online. So if I show you similar CSS frameworks, we have something called Bootstrap. So Bootstrap recently came up with the version 5, but I would still recommend you to learn Bootstrap 4 over here. So if you go to the documentation, the best way to learn any application is by using their documentation. So you can see in their documentation, they have explained it properly about how to learn Bootstrap and how to use it. Let's say you want to create a card element. So you can just search here for card, and then it will show us the different ways a card could be implemented in Bootstrap. So this is possible. There is another CSS framework called Tailwind. So there are many such CSS frameworks available online. We have another called Material UI. So yes, this is also a popular CSS framework. We have materialized CSS. So here also we have their documentation, which shows how to actually use the whole product of theirs. So we can use npm to install it directly. We don't even have to use the CDN at all. We can just install it using npm itself. We don't have to leave our terminal at all. We don't have to leave a development environment at all. Everything is possible by Node Package Manager. So yes, those were the three examples of CSS frameworks we had. So what are the other things? We have CSS compilers. So we have everything as scripting language. A CSS is a scripting language. In that we don't have functionalities of JavaScript, but then a few of them could be implemented using CSS compilers, and that is possible by using SCSS or Sass. So let me show you that as well. we have something called SAS, which is syntactically awesome style sheets. That is the full form of SAS. So in this SAS, what is possible is that we can basically create variables. So here in our CSS files, we were declaring all the colors, right? I was using those color, but let's say I want to use those color multiple times, different colors. Then I have to remember their code all the time, their hex code, the color code we have. I have to remember that. SAS can create variables for that. So in SAS, we can just simply create a variable called base color and then store it. So every time we are using that color, we can just simply use it by accessing that variable, and that makes things easier. So this is what are the possibilities of a CSS compiler. Then ahead we have front-end frameworks. So there are front-end frameworks written in JavaScript like React.js, and then we have AngularJS, and we have Vue.js. All these are JavaScript-based front-end frameworks. In this, let's say we have to load our DOM we have to do perform DOM manipulations. Then we have to write number of lines of code. So what happens is that instead of write all these things, instead of we writing ourselves, it has already all those things defined in itself, and we can just access those by just importing these frameworks, and then we can directly use everything. Similarly, we have backend libraries on npm as well. So like I showed you CORS today, cross origin, that gives us access to all the cross origin permissions and rules inside. Similarly, we have many such for front end and back end both. So for back end, we have something called Axios. So this library can generate API calls from front end to back end, like we used a form on our application, right? This button here, we created form, but instead of creating a form, if we have to create so many forms, that is not good, right? So this Axios platform can create a request response using the API call itself. If we are writing it in a JavaScript instead of HTML, HTML you cannot do it in HTML, but we can write JavaScript in along with HTML, and in that we can use Axios, which will create the post request and get request. It will perform the request to our web servers using this library. So that is also possible. So we have, let's say you are using a lot of time zone manipulations. So we have something called moment. So inside moment we have time zone. So here, let's say you are writing a code which everyone, let's say if you are making a website also. So what happens is many people from many countries can use your application, and then the difference of time zone comes in between. So what this moment time zone does is it calculates everything for us using some uh, functions it has defined in itself. So using this, we can do time zone manipulations, and like this, npm has of uh, a lot of such libraries. You just need to access them all. So on as of now, we have around 1.5 million npm packages which we can use. So you just have to go on npm's website and search for it, and that will be available for you. So with that, we are done with backend libraries and front-end libraries. There is something called cross-platform development. So for now, we develop websites for now. So these websites can be accessed by mobile also using browsers. But let's say we needed to develop applications specifically for that operating system. Or let's say we need an application that works on both Android and iOS. So we have something called React Native or Flutter, which helps in development of full stack applications in themselves, or the front end for that application in themselves. Backend can of course be written on Node for them as well. But if we are to write front end in them, so using that front end, we can then link any application's front end to our same backend itself. So let's say an application is available on both Android, iOS, and web also. So all these things can have three separate frameworks separately written for them. They all can connect to the same backend, and they just have to perform API calls then, right? So instead of that, instead of having three different applications, what we could do is we can write one single code which can work on all the different platforms we have. So that kind of development is possible by using frameworks like React Native and Flutter. So that is about cross-platform development. Then we have something called serverless development. So here, instead of making a server on our Heroku, let's say we have our local computer, and that local computer should be visible to all the internet, the whole internet. It should be visible to the whole internet. So this kind of development is called serverless development, and this is possible by using technologies like Nginx. Then we can dive into cloud computing. We can manage permissions. We can add other developers to our cloud platform. We can create virtual machines in different types of virtual machine. We can load balance our website. Let's say we have 50 million people joining, but our server can take only 20 million people at once. So what happens here is we need to balance the load. So this load balancing can be possible using cloud computing, and there are different platforms of cloud computing out there. We have different platforms like Google Cloud Platform, we have AWS, we have Microsoft Azure. So many different cloud computing platforms available to do all this load management stuff. We have architecture stuff, like instead of using HTTPS, you can use SSH as well. We can manage the permission of who can actually use that HTTP request, and all these things are possible using cloud computing. And then this list will never end. So full stack development is about knowing as many technology as you can and mastering in at least one of them. So yes, that is all for now. Do you have any questions? All right then, this was the last session of our week of web. Let us know in the comment box if you would like any more topics which we discussed in our further opportunities available to us to be conducted by DSC ACV. But till then, I'll see you that time. So bye bye.